Well, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about how the use of Moxy has played a major role in my research lab when I'm collecting data on various research projects, and also, very importantly, how it's played a role in one of the most important aspects of my company, which is our community outreach side. Exercising nutritionally, when we're not doing research, spends a lot of time working with athletes at all levels, from beginners literally to world-class athletes. In fact, this past summer, as one of the head scientists for Red Bull high performance team, we brought the Moxy monitors out to Santa Monica, California for a project called Endurance 2.0 that we worked with 4 world-class athletes out there. And we're going to continue to use those monitors with those athletes. So let me talk to you a little bit about how Moxy changes what you do when you're evaluating an athlete in sports performance. The unique aspect of Moxy is this: not only can you use the monitor to measure regional oxygen saturation and desaturation and blood flow changes indirectly at a given muscle site, but you can utilize it to see how that person's oxygenation profile changes under various situations and conditions. So for example, one of the most common tests that we do in a research lab or in a sports performance lab with athletes is to test 2 things. We test their maximum aerobic capacity using a graded exercise test, say on a treadmill, a bicycle. If you're working, like currently I'm working with a world-class master rower, and so we would do it on a rowing ergometer or a swimming ergometer. And then, besides testing their maximum aerobic capacity, we also do those athletes' lactate threshold and functional threshold. In the case of lactate threshold, we're measuring blood. We're either taking finger pricks, which many athletes don't like, or we're putting a catheter in the arm the athletes don't like. What we have found with some of the protocols that I've developed over the last 2 years, while we still continue to take blood work, because that's the gold standard, we're finding that utilizing the Moxy technology can give us exactly, and I do mean this wholeheartedly, exactly the same amount of information, and we don't have to take an ounce of blood, which means we can test an athlete more often. We don't have to worry about the risks associated with taking that blood and get some extremely valuable information. So we've developed protocols that can actually look at the oxygen and oxygenated and deoxygenated saturation profile and very accurately predict that athlete's lactate threshold and their functional threshold. Now, what we've seen how Moxy's changed what we do, when you do a functional threshold test, say in cycling, the common protocol that was developed by Andy Coggan and Hunter Allen a couple years ago and is considered the gold standard on the road is you put an athlete into a lab setting or on the road and you take their 20-minute best effort. With that 20-minute best effort, you use that value to define their functional threshold and whatever that wattage is. Well, what's most interesting with our Moxy protocols is that we've been able to identify that each athlete has a certain breadth around functional threshold. So in other words, when you do a normal functional threshold test, if you had a value of 200 watts and you used a fixed percentage below or above that, you'd say that athlete's range might be 185 watts to 210 watts to do a functional threshold workout. By using Moxy, we've been able to identify that some athletes, that might be true. For other athletes, they may have a much narrower functional threshold, where if they don't go up to a certain wattage, they don't get the right workout intensity, and if they go over a certain wattage, they're getting too much workout intensity. The Moxy monitors have helped us in our research lab with our athletes that we test to define almost on an individual basis, whether it's a 20-watt gap, a 30-watt gap, or even a 35 or 40-watt gap, that athlete can work in and still maintain that right workout for functional threshold. A second thing that we have found is that we have put Moxy monitors, say in cyclists, on both their left and right legs during the test. And many athletes have extreme pedal imbalances where they favor one side over the other, where they actually have muscle weaknesses in one side over the other. Literally, the Moxy monitors allows us to see when we measure, say, an athlete's body composition and find out their left leg has less muscle than the right, how that affects their oxygenation profiles. And we actually can see the physiological response to the physical difference that they may have in muscle mass in each leg. So what we have been able to do with Moxy monitors is once we see a physical difference and it actually shows up physiologically, then we can adjust and tell that athlete's coach how to adjust their training program so that they fix those imbalances, so that they work on improving the muscularity of the weaker leg, improve the aerobic capacity and the threshold capacity of the weaker leg, so now you have a more balanced athlete when it comes to their cycling. The other thing that we've done with the Moxy monitors that have really improved the actual performance monitoring of an athlete, say during high intensity interval training, is use the Moxy monitors not only to set up the length of the actual interval, but also to set up the recovery time in between those intervals. For example, if somebody's doing a very high intensity interval, we would use the Moxy monitors to look at when they reach their critical desaturation point above their functional threshold, and once they reach that point, we shut off the athlete's high intensity interval. Then we monitor when their hemoglobin comes back up to baseline values and when their oxygen resaturation gets back up to baseline. And then we would restart the HIIT interval. And we have found by doing that, an athlete has a more efficient set of intervals, they have a more efficient set of recoveries, and we can get more work per unit time because we're allowing them to recover properly based on how their oxygen resaturation goes, versus using some arbitrary preset number that says you're going to do a certain wattage and intensity and you're going to rest for this certain amount of time. You got to give us 12 intervals and you're going to do it. And many athletes have coaches that work like that, but it's not scientific and it's not based in the numbers. And so the Moxy monitors can now allow coaches to truly work in a scientific way for the actual work interval and rest interval.